Polina
Excited.
Marinova
Okay.
Pompliano. Let's go. Let's do this. So you are the author of Hidden Genius. You worked as a reporter for Fortune magazine for 5 years. You wrote more than
hmm
1,300 articles. You earned the trust of prominent investors, entrepreneurs. Like you were all about talking to people about success. And then you started your newsletter, The Profile. And
hmm
obviously that was a big journey, an adventure. It took off, like it was very, very successful. But you had put that kind of into practice of studying really successful people. To me, like you're like the Napoleon Hill of the modern day era. Like you're coming in and just like revealing the secrets. And then I got your book, Hidden Genius. And honestly, I was awestruck. Like, and for a book to take me that way, I read a lot of books. I've written books. I interview a lot of people on this podcast, but like, you know, when something just rises to the top. And there's been a couple of books last year that did that. Your book was one of two that did that. And so very, very grateful for you coming on the show, talking to the audience today, and just talking about Hidden Genius.
I really appreciate it, Tim. I That means a lot because, as you know, writing is a very lonely endeavor. So when you actually get to talk about the book and like meet people who have read the book, it makes it feel alive.
It sort of puts into context all those lonely moments and all when you're grappling with things, like especially in the editing process, right?
hmm
How was the process for you? How was your writing journey?
Yeah, so it's funny because I started writing, which writing is a lonely endeavor, and I started doing that in a very lonely time because, as many people would know, if you're a parent, going through the newborn phase is very lonely because you're kind of cut off from the world. You're probably at home with the baby. You're probably not going outside as much because the baby's still very small, and you're not getting enough sleep. So it's like that is when I started writing. My daughter was 3 months old. So in that period, I felt like writing the book was kind of an escape, but an escape to do what I wanted to do. And it was something that I did for myself because writing is where I feel like I'm most myself. So
Hmm.
it made sense. It's just that the process of it all was very much like me at night in front of a keyboard writing, or feeding the baby and getting ideas at 2 a.m. to for the book. So it was like I spent a lot of time alone, and that was in 2021. Oh, no, sorry, 2022. And so then when I was promoting the book and actually meeting people who had read the book in 2023, it was just a really cool feeling because this thing that you did alone, you can now share with like millions of people.
Ah, fuck, I concur. Like that's it's amazing, and I could just tell like the thought that has gone into it. Every word, it's a work of art. It
Yeah.
truly, truly is. Like I recommend it to everyone. Hidden Genius. Like this is all about uncovering.
Thank you, Tim.
Well, I promote it so much anyway in my own daily life. Like everyone, like go get this book, go get this book. Like we had to have you on the show. So it is a book about uncovering how the world's most successful people think. It's exceptional. The bits of genius in it, the actual subtitles and the bits of genius, the way that it's structured is great. It'll allow you to grab onto it. But to start this off, then I think if we've been doing a lot about rejection so far on my Instagram this month, like
Mhm.
thinking about how we can prepare ourselves for 2024. And one of the things as a negotiator and an expert in that field of persuasion and influence, one of the things that I teach a lot around is actually immersion and how do you overcome rejection and what is it? And so on page 22 in the book, you talk about failing into success. Like, what does that mean? And like, how do we fail into success? And what are some of the characteristics that original creators have in common?
Yeah. So I don't know about you, but I've never met anybody who said, I'm going to do this really big, ambitious thing and then nailed it on the first try. Like, that's usually not how it goes. The way it usually goes is that we all see the final product of quote unquote success, but the road to get there was like failure after failure. So in the book, I talk about Ed Catmull, who's the co founder of Pixar Animation. And he talks about how when they're creating a movie, and these movies are always very disruptive and very original, he's like, we sit in a room and we all argue and debate and attack the idea, never each other, always the idea. So when they're attacking this idea, they're trying to find like what could be wrong with it. If you think about a movie like Toy Story, it could have been a really, really poorly made commercial movie. A story about toys, it's like, oh my God, like
Mm.
this is gonna be, where can I buy this, all this stuff. But no, it turned out really well because that was one of the objections. And he said that every single time that this idea comes to life, the process is filled with failure after failure. So he's like, but to us, failure is just a data point on this journey. It's like, oh, that didn't work. Let's not go down that path. Let's try a different path. And the more that you fail, the more that you can iterate and learn from those failures. So he's like, even if, you know, he's like, I don't even see failure as like a failure. He's like, the only way it's a failure is if you do something, it doesn't work, and then you don't learn from it. The reason that Pixar's films are a success is because they're continuously iterating and learning from them to make something really, really original and good. And even Ed Catmull's like, when we, launch a movie and we put out a movie, I still think it's not that good, but it's just like the least bad that we
Mm.
could have gotten it. So it's like failure, it's really about how you think about it. A lot of people think of failure as like rock bottom, I can never recover from this. And other people think of, if you and I both set out to do an audacious goal and I keep failing and you never do, you're just kind of like slowly inching away at it. The faster that I fail, the more experience that I have to get to that destination faster because I'm just trying more stuff. Versus you who maybe don't have the experience of the failures, so you haven't learned that much, so it'll take you longer. You may not even ever get to that point because you've just never failed.
Yeah, it's almost like you're not seeing it as just a chapter or a data point, as you said. And I think as well, that
Mm-hmm.
what you said, he credits his success to the consistent willingness to fail. Like it's a participatory experience. They want to
Yeah,
fail because it's going to take them closer to the actual finish line. And yet the finish line is understood to be never finished. So it's understood that
exactly.
we can always keep improving, yet there's going to be a point at which
Mhm.
there's minimal returns and we need to move on and just life happens, right? But we've reached that kind of that
Yeah.
acceptable point. But no, that's a really good
Yes.
starting point because and I think as well what that exemplifies is it doesn't matter what level of success you get to because we all look at Pixar and Steve Jobs and if Ed Catmull is a co-founder of Pixar like as a very high quality revolutionary
Hmm.
adventurous, creative film studios. Like it's definitely something we believe in. But obviously, if they're doing this, how can we then apply this to our lives? It's like thinking that we're suddenly better than that because we don't have this consistent willingness to fail yet. If we lent into it, that's where the experience and the growth is going to be.
Exactly.
Beautiful.
It's like
Beautiful.
small, tiny risks every day, and those risks may not pay off, which some
Mm.
people might frame as failing, but like it's up to you to decide if you failed. I always think about, when I was like in high school playing soccer, and I was like, I'm not the best at this, but it's like, am I not the best because or like, did I fail because I didn't really try and put in the work every single day, like some of my other players? Or was I just like, you know, oh my God, like this is what I want to do with my life. And I consider that a failure. It's all about how you frame it.
Mhm. I think that's true. And as well, that saying around if you've only got 40% to give today and you give 40%, then that's
Mm,
100%. That's the type, like it's an attitude.
that's true.
And I guess
Hmm.
today's world where we're rammed with all of the perfection on Instagram and everything's sort of perfect. And it's like this constant feed of like, well, this is the acceptable bar that you've got. And if you didn't get there, or you don't have beautiful weather on your holiday, or it was a failure, or I can't do the Instagram shots, or whatever it was, it's a failure. So it's like, no, just showing up is the win
Right.
and your intention behind it is the win.
Hmm.
Man,
Totally.
this is I mean, it's so good. Chapter two then, mental toughness and mastering it. Like, what does that mean to you? Like, as in mental toughness?
I've always considered mental toughness as the ability to endure pain or discomfort for a prolonged period of time. So, we don't have to be mentally tough every single day. The point is that as a human, you will at some point have some sort of blow that will bring you to your knees, whether it's a death in the family or just an unexpected loss of some sort. You will be shocked and
Mhm.
taken aback and not have expected this because we live in a world of uncertainty. And then it's like, what do you do from that point on? Some people get really depressed. They kind of fall into darkness. Other people are actually like energized to rise up and become a better, more resilient version of themselves. So to me, it's like, how can I become the latter and not the former? Because the former is just kind of like the instinctual, oh my goodness, this rocked my world. How am I ever going to recover? So to me, like mental resilience is developing the skills to be able to power through that period of time. And not only power through as in like I wake up and I do my job, but power through in how can I come out on the other side a stronger human being. And I think in that chapter, I talk a lot about make yourself uncomfortable every single day in small ways so that when the big events come, you're not completely shook where you can't function because you've been exposing yourself to tiny hardship every day to build the skills of resilience in those big moments.
It's almost like an inoculation. Like they're
Yeah,
giving you a bit, you're
exactly.
giving yourself a
It's
bit of the bad thing or the hardship to then be able to actually fight it off when it happens. Wow. Like
a
this.
great point.
I like this, Paulina. You're full of wisdom. Like you must have come across quite a lot when obviously you moved from Bulgaria at age 4 to the US. Like you must have not even speaking the language, right? Like, did you put some of this into practice
Mhm.
then? Was it an early age that you got into this? Because I'm just reflecting and thinking in my life, like I did get shook. Like my mum passed away at an early age, like, but I didn't.
Wow.
I wish I'd read your book then. I wish it had been around then. I wish I'd known. You know, later years, I got into personal development and self-development and improvement and realized a lot
Mhm.
about that. But like when that happened, it was a shake that I didn't see coming. Now, when we're talking like this, like you know they can come and you know you can kind of have things
Mhm.
blindside you, and you then know that you can rise up from there. But like, tell us about your experience.
Yeah, so I was actually I was like 8 when we moved from Bulgaria, but it was still a very young age, but enough where I could remember a life before the one we had here. So I think, like you said, when you have a parent pass away, like at an early age, or in my case, it was a big life change. We moved
Mm,
countries, my parents got divorced, and like it was just, and I went to a new school and new friends and new everything. And all that happened in the span of a year. So it's like, not only did it teach me life is uncertain, but it also taught me there's a level of like self-reliance you have to have because these authority figures that you see as now it's like you can say government or institutions. At the time it was like my parents. They're not always like reliable or steady, and so I learned that like you have to there's a certain level of self-trust you have to have at an early age. And I think if you don't have that and you haven't been exposed to a big life event like that at an early age, if you go through it at a later age, I think it can be much more jarring than it is when you're young. But as a young kid, it kind of rewires you to see the world in a different way, right? So not only does it give you perspective, but it's also like it builds mental toughness in a way that it's like hard to describe. So, I mean, so we're talking about mental toughness, and there's a woman that I want to highlight from the book, Edith Eva Eger. She was a Holocaust survivor, and she talks a lot about how like suffering is universal, but victimhood is optional. So, in other words, like a lot of times, like events like a death or a divorce or things like that are external. And she says like there's two buckets. There's victimization and then there's victimhood. Victimization is, your partner cheats on you, your boss yells at you, somebody bullies you at school. Those are external events, and all of us at some point in our lives will be victimized. We'll be on the receiving end of that, but that's an external thing. Victimhood, she says, is internal, and that's the part where it's like you start seeing the world from a victim standpoint. Like, why is this always happening to me? You start nitpicking everything. You start seeing the world as like a dark place that is happening to you. And she's saying that that comes from the inside. And that's how a lot of us become our own jailers, right? You've seen that
Mm.
cartoon of like a prisoner shaking the bars, but it's only in front. He's free to go. There's no bars around him on the sides or in the back. It's just the front. So why doesn't he? And it's like that's the point, because it's self-inflicted. So I'm very self-aware now of in what scenario is this just victimization, just something happening from the outside that is bound to happen to anybody, and how can I respond, versus me seeing the world like, oh, I have to deal with this and it's not fair and you're not doing your part and all this stuff that puts us in a victim mindset. So I like the idea that you can you are the master of your universe, and you can sort of control your fate, in a sense that, for me, mental resilience means that even if life is like this, I'm always like that.
Yeah. You are phenomenal. You know what it is, Polina. The way it's the ability to tell the story, but to tell it and to actually convey the message simply, yet people can follow it all the way through. You are phenomenal. Like you're phenomenal. Thank you.
I appreciate you, Tim.
That's really
I
cool.
appreciate it.
I think I have the quote here, like victimhood is optional when we become our own jailers.
Mhm,
We choose the confines of the victim's mind. And it's what you were saying there around
mhm,
personifying pain, making friends with pain, the pain cave. Like there's things we can do that she mentions that can help us
mhm.
choose the right path away from victimhood and just accept these things are going to happen and how do we respond? Like something I'm going to do in 2024 is for my son Levi. I'm going to take him on an adventure
Mm,
and we're going to go out because something in the book, you talk about Tommy Caldwell, that was a rock climber.
Caldwell.
And yeah. And he's saying that the best thing his dad did to him was the elective hardship. And so, they're sleeping in snow caves, and I'm not sure I'm going to sleep in a snow cave, but like just getting him out
Yeah.
of the mountain or maybe taking him up and doing, climb Mount Fuji or something big, but something that he will come
Yeah.
back from that just really filled with like a spirit of confidence and courage that can fill him up.
And the reason that's really powerful is because it, again, like reframes what hardship is, and it turns it into adventure. So the elective hardship that Tommy Caldwell's dad did, it was like, we're sleeping in a snow cave, like all this stuff. A lot of people would consider that a hardship, but if you look at life as an adventure, it's just a tiny switch and it makes a difference. I forget where I heard this. Somebody recently, maybe it was a podcast, I forget who it was, but it was such a good point. They said that with their kids, they've started like when their kids are like, "Oh, can we play outside?" If it's raining or if it's windy or if it's snowing, some parents say, "Oh, it's bad weather. Like, let's stay in."
Hmm.
And his point was, we'll go out anyway and we'll play out in the rain because I don't want them to think that like the external circumstances can affect what you do and how you play and whatever. So it's like, why is it bad weather? Just because we decided that like we don't want to get wet. But if you go out and play in the rain, it can be actually pretty fun.
How cool is that? Let's like say, let's yeah, we've labeled it bad.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's just weather. Like we've labeled it bad
it's
emotion. Yeah,
just
it's just
weather.
emotion. Yeah, it's just weather. We've labeled it a bad thing. Yeah, it's just hardship, and we're going to use that hardship to get growth. So actually, yeah, that's what wicked. I bet it was Jesse Itzler. You've come across Jesse Itzler?
It might have been
Feels
Jesse.
feels
I
like
have a,
him.
it sounds like a Jesse thing, but I think it was somebody
Oh, is
else.
it?
I'll
Yeah.
look it up and get back to you.
You talk a lot about relationships, and there's a whole section on it in the book. What is the compound interest of trust?
Yeah. Okay. So I am someone, and this is probably why I was drawn to journalism, but I don't trust easily. And I don't know why. I don't know what it is. I probably should like do some work to figure out why, but it's like I've always been taught to kind of question authority and to be like, why? And then I don't trust you. What are you hiding? That kind of thing. And journalism is like, especially investigative journalism, which is what I wanted to do, is like, let's get to the truth. But the point is that trust is the bedrock of any relationship. So over the years, I've kind of learned that, for example, as a reporter, to build trust with a source, I need a relationship. Like I can't
Mm,
just walk in and start asking questions. Like you need to build some sort of rapport or trust before you can have a really solid conversation. There's small ways to do that. For example, in an interview, it's what you're doing. You offer a little bit of your experience and the other person responds because they feel like you've offered something and now I'm going to offer something back, versus you just sitting there asking me question after question
mm,
without offering up anything personal. I do the same thing when I'm interviewing someone. I'm always like, here's something like personal to make them feel comfortable, and then the conversation starts flowing. There's a little bit of trust in a very short period of time, but the point is that for if you want to build trust over the long term, it's you have to think about it as the compound interest of trust. That trust builds on itself over a long period of time. And so, for example, I think it was Naval Ravikant who said, all returns in life, whether in wealth, relationships, or knowledge, come from compound interest in anything. So the more that you invest in a relationship, the more trust interest that it pays off. And I heard Reid Hoffman say this, and he put it as a formula, which is um, consistency plus time equals trust. So we as human beings do not trust inconsistent people who constantly break their promises. And the reason is because we like consistency. And if you do it for a long period of time and you keep your promises, then it yields trust. And the cool part of this is that it doesn't just work with other people, it also works with ourselves. So if I say my goal in 2024 is to work out every day and I don't do it every day, I lose a little bit of trust with myself. And that chips away at confidence. And I've realized that really confident people, they're confident because they continuously keep the promises that they make to themselves. And I talk about like David Goggins in the mental toughness chapter. When he was ready to change his entire life, he was like, okay, I'm going to look in the mirror and I'm going to say, you're fat, you're lazy, and you're a liar. What are you going to do about it? It's the what are you going to do about it that builds that trust with him. Like, okay, I'm ready to change. And what he did was he posted little sticky notes around his mirror that said, okay, I'm going to go on a 2 mile run today. I'm going to go one day without lying for validation. Those things are small habits that start building trust with himself. And he does it, the more you do it, the more that you feel confident, the more that you can become, like a David Goggins.
don't we all wish that?
If
I
that's
mean,
your goal. Yeah.
yes, I think that's a really good point. Like, and just to the fact about David was being vulnerable with himself. He was offering himself a little bit to then lean into it, to then go, what do you
Mm-hmm.
do about it? To then force himself to do it. He's going to go, well, we've been authentic. We've got trust with ourselves. Now we
Exactly.
have to act on it, and now we have to go change our stars and do the thing. That's yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's huge. And obviously the compounding comes because I guess it's rarer. The air is rare. Like as you get longevity in the relationship and you consistently show up, some people will fall away from that
Mm-hmm.
trust because they can't be consistent like that. And so then the strength of the relationship comes out even more prominently because not everyone can keep up to that level. And the same thing with yourself, right? That's if you're super confident, you're saying it's because you've kept consistent trust with yourself for way more than normal,
Mm-hmm.
than average, right? That's wow. So basically, we've got a lot to do if we want to get more confident. It's just keep those promises forever and don't break them. I think in the profile you asked your readers to share their best marriage advice when you got married. How did you meet your
Mm-hmm.
husband actually? Like I know that he goes on about a lot about the JP Morgan library and you took him there and he loves it and all of these different parts.
We met actually on Twitter, ironically, when
Oh,
I know it's so funny. I had like 2,000 followers and he had like 300. Um, and I wrote an article. This is I wrote an article, Fortune, And then as a reporter, fun fact, you can take a link, put it in the Twitter search bar, and it shows you who shared that link. So I always did that just to see who shared my articles. And I saw that he shared it and I liked it. I retweeted it. I followed him. And then he messaged me and he was like, hey, let's get coffee. Like, I
No
invest in
way.
early stage. So it was it was supposed to be like a business meeting, but we ended up talking for a very long time. And then I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is
It's
not going to be a business thing.
oh, wow, that's so cool on Twitter. Wow, that's epic.
Yeah,
That is
of all
epic.
places.
So then you got married and you asked your
hmm
readers on the of the profile what marriage's advice they had. Like what came through that? What was the sense?
It was so interesting because the best advice actually came not from the people who had been married. I mean, a lot of good advice came from people who had been married for a long time, but actually, I found the best advice from the people who had been married, divorced, and either remarried or not married at all, because they kind of had the vision to look back and be like, whoa, okay, here's what happened. Here's what I did wrong. They did like a post mortem where the people who are still married never really do that because they're like, oh, we're so happy. But but I thought it was so interesting. Yeah, happy people, bad advice. No, I'm kidding. Um, it was so interesting because a lot of them had learned from their first marriage, and it's sad that it came to an end because of those things. But they're like, wow, if I could, like now that I'm in my second relationship or whatever, I am applying these things. And I remember somebody said that in his prior marriage, he was very, very petty and it became like a tit for tat. Like, I did the dishes, you didn't do the laundry. I did this, you didn't do that. And he was like, I was so focused on being right that it was over such petty little things that it chipped away at the relationship to the point where we lost respect for each other and then it broke down. And he said, like, basically they don't give out trophies for being right for whatever argument. They give out divorce papers. That's your trophy. But he's like, I think what I learned as a whole from all of the advice is that relationships don't end because of one like big blowout fight. They usually end after years of tiny moments of disrespect and turning away from each other and like um and uh not taking an interest in what the other person cares about. I think that's probably the biggest. So these little things, I was like, whoa. I mean, there's a lot to get right, but truly, like Charlie Munger says, if you just like focus on not doing the wrong things, you'd actually be much better off.
Yeah, it seems it's more like a slow degradation or degrading of
Mm-hmm.
the relationship over time, chipping away at the foundation so that then the two ships that have separated over time and suddenly there's nothing there. But
Yeah.
wow,
But the good news is that those little things, if you do the good little things, small things over a long period of time, then compound interest of good things happens, and you have a
mm,
good relationship. I think it was John Gottman, the psychotherapist. He said, think about doing a lot of small things often versus big things occasionally, because most people focus on what am I going to do for her birthday, what am I going to do for Valentine's Day, like Christmas, but focus on the small everyday things like, oh, I really appreciate you doing X, or I really know that you found this interesting. Here's an article that I think you'd really like. Those tiny moments actually build into something really, really good.
oh for sure. Like, I just if there's a day that if I want to have a good day tomorrow and I step out and I get my wife a coffee, like not with her asking me to get a
Mm-hmm.
coffee, I bring her a coffee. Like I've gone out, I've got her coffee, I've
My
got
husband brought me this coffee this morning.
good man. There you go. He's in for a good day. If
Yeah,
I do that,
exactly.
like I know it's going to be a good day. And then if I send a couple of messages that are unprompted, unneeded, just loving messages and just
Mm-hmm.
it's going to set the thing in motion. But it's not the big thing. It's not the massive gesture. It's not the massive diamond necklace or the shoes or
Exactly.
whatever like that you think you've got to go out and get. Yeah, that's true. Telling better stories, chapter 4, like there's a quote, people remember what they can live with more often than how they lived by David Carr. What does that really mean?
Oh man. Okay. So chapter 4 is actually my favorite chapter. And I think it's like the most underrated chapter because nobody ever asked me about it. Um, except you. But I
Here we go.
really I re I really enjoyed writing that chapter because the kind of the through line of Hidden Genius is that perspective is very slippery, and it's not something that you can like pin down and say like this is exactly the type of person I am and it will forever be, and this is my perspective on this one thing. It's not like that. We change all the time, we evolve, we get new information, we change our beliefs and mind and whatever. So David Carr, I read his memoir The Night of the Gun quite a few years ago, but I still remember this part. David Carr was an amazing, amazing writer. He's like one of the best in my eyes. But he was an awful partner and dad. Well, depending on how, in his early life, he didn't make the right choices. And he was also a drug addict. And he talks about how there's a period in his life he does not remember. So in the memoir, he goes on like this fact finding mission to try and uncover what actually happened.
Mhm.
And that's why the title is The Night of the Gun. But what he found is that the more people he talked to, the more different versions of the truth he got because everybody came at the truth from their own perspectives, with their own opinions, with their own beliefs. So he was like, well, what is the truth? And Robert Evans, I wrote this quote down. He said, there are three sides to every story: yours, mine, and the truth.
Mhm.
And the point of that is, yeah, like you and I can see the exact same thing and we can come away from it with totally different ideas. It's the, if you have a victim mindset and I don't, and like we get hit by a bus, we both got hit by the bus, and you could say, oh my God, I'm so unlucky. I can't believe this happened to me. What are the chances? And I can say, oh my God, how amazing that we got hit by a bus and like we're still alive. It's like those two totally same situation, different perspectives. So people, the quote, people remember what they can live with more often than how they lived.
Right.
The point of that quote is that if I'm a drug addict and I look back on my life, I might kind of distort and change a few things to make myself feel like the hero of my story, even if it's really painful to look in the mirror and say, you know what, I was a really shitty person. Maybe I should change. So it's like, that's what I can live with.
Whoa, that's mind blowing. Is that's mind blowing. Yeah, that's what I can live with now. Wow. And yeah, you're selling yourself on a perspective you want to hear, yet there are multiple perspectives. And obviously there's stuff that can happen to you that you can either turbocharge your life or not and can keep you stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Massive. That's massive. Chapter 6, taking risk, taking risk. I love chapter 6 as well. You explore the practices and like I'm just remembering and recalling when I was reading this book. Like I read it in about 48 hours, like literally, but like some of the chapters you're going through, and then this one hit me, and I was like, wow, it's a bit about big wave surfers, mountaineers, astronauts. Like it was full of people that are
Yeah.
taking massive risk and are managing a lot of uncertainty. Like, what was it that you learned from these folk particularly?
So, okay. So the biggest thing that I learned from them is that these are people who it's like their professions or their hobbies are life or death. Like the downside of the risk is death. So what I learned from them is when you're making decisions in life, you always want to think about giving your future self optionality. So, for example, I have a much younger sister. She was applying to go to colleges, and she was applying to one that was like a smaller, more, community college versus a larger school. But the larger school didn't have her exact major. So I was like, so she was like, where do I go? And I was like, well, okay, you're choosing between something really, really small and a really big school. You have to think about the alumni who come from out of all of those. One of them graduates like 30,000 people every 4 years, and then the other like 4,000 people every 4 years. So it's like, which one will give you the most optionality for your future self? Maybe they don't have your major now. Maybe you could always transfer, but it'll look better to other schools, all this stuff. So it's like when you're thinking about what decision you're about to make, it's like, will the future me be like, man, I have so many options as a result of this one opportunity versus I found this exact type of thing that I want and the way that I want it to work out, but in the future, I'm not sure, like I have a future there. So when I got a job at Fortune magazine, it's a business magazine. They do long form articles. That was like my dream.
Mm,
But the job that I got was a social media editor. I was like, I don't care about social media, but I know, I know that if I end up at Fortune magazine, I will somehow weasel my way into writing, even though I'm starting off as a social media manager. That you're not supposed to write, right?
mm,
And I did, because I knew that that was a place where I could grow and learn from the people who work there. It was just like a hotbed for optionality. So the people that I used as example in the risk taking chapter is like their jobs are life or death. So, Chris Hadfield, he was an astronaut and he was out like on the International Space Station fixing something. He got blinded in both of his eyes. He ended up being blind outside of the space station. And then instead of panicking and being like, oh my God, there's something in my eyes I cannot see, instead of panicking, his brain went into problem solving optionality mode, which was, what are my options? A, I could call Houston, ask for help. B, Scott Perzinski, my colleague, can come like do a crew rescue. C, I could open a vent on my helmet, let some air out, whatever. So it's like the first instinct after taking a massive risk is always panic. That's like the natural thing. But the second has to be your rational mind turning on and being like, what are my options? And
mm.
you can do your future self a favor by creating optionality. And I think one of the quotes that I really like for this is, make reversible decisions quickly and irreversible ones deliberately. Because the irreversible ones, like, there's not that much optionality. Once you decide to have a kid, you can't ever not be a parent. Uh, but the ones that you can make quickly and it's like a smaller risk, do it. You might fail, but
Mm.
you'll learn from it and you'll iterate.
Wow. Yeah, congratulations on your second child as well, by the way.
Oh, thank you, Tim.
That
Yeah, I'm
irreversible
like
decision.
panicking because I have no idea what's. No, no, no. I said I'm panicking because I have no idea what's going on over there, but right now I'm all in.
No, I love it. No, I can see that you're all in and you have been from the start. And like this has just been really amazing the way you've delivered this.
Thank
Final
you.
question then. On
Yeah.
building an engaged community, when we talk about chapter 8 and forming emotional
Mhm.
connection, there's a quote by Brandon Stanton, The Humans of New York, like
Mhm.
to really know pain in other people is to know yourself in them. And that, I mean, I knew about Humans of New York, but I didn't know he said that. And that's the kind of that moved
Yeah.
me a lot. Like what does that mean to you?
He said that in response to, I interviewed him in 2020, and it was right around he had this series that he did on this woman, Tanqueray, who was like a former burlesque dancer. And then now she's in her 80s and she's having health problems. But it was this whole journey of pain. And so when I was talking to him, I was like, God, like millions of people have engaged with this. Now they had raised several $1 million for her to go to the doctor and get some help and all this stuff. And I was like, why do you think it connected with people so much? And he said that the stories that resonate the most are not the super polished, manicured, we went to Bali and had a great time types of posts on social media. It is more the, okay, here's the truth of what happened. Here's how I felt. Here's where I am now. And Brandon said that his favorite question to ask people on the street before taking their photo is he looks for the gaps. So he's like, I ask them questions like, how has your life turned out differently than what you thought it would be? Or what's your greatest regret?
Mhm.
It's like the way to build intimacy in a really short period of time is to ask people things where there's like a gap or there's a big transformation or a change or something that caused them to undergo some sort of metamorphosis and become a different type of person.
Mhm.
And that's why a lot of the stories on Humans of New York are some sort of personal transformation. And so he was like, we connect with each other's pain much more so than our joys and our whatever, because we all know how that feels. We all know how it feels to lose somebody really close to you. And it's like a gut wrenching, very primal sort of feeling versus, oh, I'm so happy today. It's like, yes, like that's great, but it's like we focus, we connect with each other much more so on the primal like pain level than on the I'm so happy today type of level.
That's massive, massive. And what a note to end this on. Polina, thank you for your contribution. Thank you for your dedication. Thank you for getting into Fortune magazine and fighting to be a writer and then doing the profile. And I think everybody get this book. It will change your life. You have changed lives. You've changed mine and you've changed a lot of lives. Like this is only beginning for you, I can
Thank you,
tell, but
Tim.
like it's just you really have got a skill here. It is your hidden genius, like the ability to storytell and to connect with the people in this way. So thank you for coming and doing that with us today. Really, really grateful.
Tim, thank you so much. You're an excellent interviewer. I really
Oh,
enjoyed it.
thank you. Yeah, cool. Maybe it's my hidden, I don't know. Thank you so much.